In the dimly lit steel briefing room buried beneath Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, where the air always smelled faintly of gun oil, salt water, and the metallic tang of anticipation, Lieutenant Commander Rourke paced slowly with a clipboard in hand as 12 seasoned SEALs lounged around the table, trading jokes that bounced off the walls. But the joking shifted into subtle snickers and raised eyebrows the moment the door hissed open and she walked in. Lieutenant Mara Hale, the only woman in the unit, the only female SEAL sniper the Navy had ever certified at Tier 1 level. Her uniform crisp, her jaw locked, and her eyes sharp in a way that suggested she had already memorized the terrain maps pinned to the projector before Rourke put them up. But as always, a few of the men couldn't resist muttering under their breath because no matter how many times Mara had proven herself, no matter how many long-range shots she'd taken across deserts, mountains, and hostile jungles, there were those who still thought it was funny to question her presence. And today was no different as Briggs whispered, "Great, the princess is here," prompting a quiet ripple of laughter. But Mara pretended not to hear because she had learned long ago that the only answer to doubt was results. And results were the one thing she always delivered, especially on missions like the one being briefed now. An extraction of an American intelligence asset trapped behind hostile lines in a mountainous region that locals called the Sleeping God Range, where a covert enemy cell had dug into a ridge line with 12 confirmed hostiles, heavily armed, disciplined, and positioned like chess pieces guarding a narrow valley, their firing lanes overlapping in a way that would shred any incoming rescue team. Unless, of course, someone could dismantle the entire Overwatch network from extreme distance. Someone like her. Someone who could breathe steady under pressure, calculate wind drift by feel, and make shots. That often left even veteran shooters questioning physics. And Rourke's eyes lingered on her longer than on the others as he said, "One shooter goes forward alone," prompting a wave of murmurs, some skeptical, some outright annoyed, until Briggs scoffed, "Yeah, sure, send her. Maybe they'll laugh themselves to death." And a few more snickers rose, but Mara simply leaned forward, studying the topographic layout with the cold precision of someone already constructing firing solutions in her mind. And when Rourke asked if anyone had an objection, she said before the others could open their mouths, "I'll take the ridge," her voice calm, steady, but carrying an underlying force that immediately silenced the room, though not without a few begrudging smirks exchanged between those still convinced she would fold under pressure. But as the team geared up and the Black Hawk thundered into the night sky, slicing through clouds heavy with Pacific moisture, Mara sat near the bay door with her suppressed .300 Norma Magnum rifle cradled in her lap like a living extension of her body, her mind replaying every angle, every line of sight she had calculated from the briefing. And as the wind whipped her braid behind her, she reminded herself quietly that this story would be told later on her Brave Stories, the YouTube channel that honored real courage, where people would be asked to subscribe and comment where they were watching from, though she doubted anyone would ever fully understand the weight of what she carried heading into missions like this. Because courage was easy to admire from afar, but brutally heavy to bear in the moment, especially when you stepped alone into darkness where 12 rifles were waiting to kill you. And as the helicopter dropped her at a rocky clearing 5 kilometers from the ridge, the night swallowed her instantly, her boots sinking softly into the cold earth, her senses sharpening to every rustle of wind and shifting of leaves, and she moved, like a shadow, silent, controlled, methodical, ascending the ridge's jagged terrain while enemy spotters unknowingly scanned right past her, their thermal scopes unable to catch the tiny insulated movements she executed with a precision born of thousands of hours of training. And when she reached the final slope overlooking the valley, she lay flat on the limestone, unfolded her bipod, and sighted the first hostile, a bearded man smoking near a radio station, unaware that she had already measured the exact distance between his heartbeat and the moment it would stop, and she exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger, and watched him crumple silently, then swiveled 73 degrees to pick the next target, adjusting for the sudden crosswind crawling through the gorge, firing again, dropping another man sprawled across a crate of ammunition. And by the time the third body fell, the camp was erupting in confusion, flashlights jittering wildly, men shouting in languages she couldn't fully recognize, but none of them could pinpoint the direction of the shots because Mara's rifle was suppressed and she shifted positions every 2 kills, leaving no trace but footprints too soft to be heard under the roar of panicked footsteps. And while enemy commanders frantically tried to reorganize, she eliminated the radio man, preventing outside communication. Then the machine gunner climbing a ladder to access the main Overwatch tower, sending him tumbling backward into the dust. And with each precise shot, 7, 8, 9, the camp began to collapse inward. Men scrambling for cover that offered no safety from a sniper who saw everything, predicted every desperate movement, and used their panic against them as she took down the 10th enemy, sprinting for the ridge's far edge, followed by the 11th who attempted to drag a wounded comrade behind a bunker, and finally the 12th, the squad leader, who barked orders until a single round cut his command short, dropping him beside the radio console he had been trying to restart. And once the ridge lay silent except for the settling gravel and distant echo of her last shot rolling through the valley, Mara radioed the team with a simple, controlled breath. Overwatch cleared, and those same men who had mocked her earlier sat stunned in the helicopter as Rourke whispered, 12 hostiles, all neutralized. Realizing that the woman they had doubted had just dismantled an entire enemy defense alone, buying them a safe corridor to extract the trapped asset. And when the SEALs reached her position 15 minutes later, they found her sitting silently beside her rifle, the stars reflected in her calm eyes, as though nothing she had done carried any weight at all. Though deep inside, she felt the familiar mixture of relief and sharpened resolve, because she knew the world would always question her, test her, mock her. But every mission ended the same way, with those same doubters realizing she was the one they depended on, the one who turned impossible odds into completed objectives. And as the team flew back across the dark mountains toward friendly territory, Briggs finally sat beside her, staring at her profile for a long moment before mumbling, "Guess we shouldn't have doubted you." And Mara didn't look at him as she answered quietly, "You shouldn't doubt any operator, male or female, who's willing to walk in a fire for you." And for once, Briggs didn't joke, didn't smirk, only nodded with a respect he had never shown before. And when they finally touched down at Coronado, the first rays of dawn painting gold across the landing pad, Mara stepped off the helicopter with her rifle slung low, already knowing that somewhere out there on a screen watched by thousands, her story would be told again on her Brave Stories, where viewers would be reminded to subscribe and to comment where they were watching from, not because she wanted recognition, but because stories like hers reminded the world that bravery wasn't measured by gender, mockery, or expectation. It was measured by action, by the silent steps taken in the dark when no one was watching, and by the 12 hostiles who never saw her coming. Yet she didn't crack, even when they tried pushing her further than required, stacking extra weight on her pack when they thought she wouldn't notice, altering her navigation markers to confuse her, assigning her night rotations twice as often as anyone else. But she endured every unfair tactic until one night, during a high-altitude endurance test. A storm rolled in with winds so violent it ripped branches from ancient pines and sent debris slicing through the dark, and several trainees fell behind, disoriented by the chaos. But not Elena, because something awakened inside her, something primal and refined, a survival instinct sharpened by every moment she had ever been underestimated, and she moved through the forest like she belonged there, recalibrating her path every few seconds, tracking with senses she didn't know she possessed. And as lightning cracked across the horizon, she found one of the men, Sanders, collapsed against a boulder, disoriented from a head gash he sustained. When a falling branch hit him, she dragged him upright, slung him over her shoulders despite his weight in the violent wind, and carried him downhill until the storm broke enough that they could safely continue. And when they reached the base tent, the medics rushed him inside while the instructor stared at her in disbelief. Not because she had saved a man bigger than her, but because she had arrived earlier than several recruits who hadn't carried anyone at all. And after that night, the murmurs began. Not malicious whispers this time, but grudging respect. Conversations the men didn't think she could hear Admissions that maybe she wasn't there as a political gesture. Maybe she wasn't a symbol or an experiment. Maybe she was simply better. Still, the true test came during the final field simulation, a 48-hour operation meant to replicate every fear, exhaustion, and failure point that the human mind could endure. And the mission required her team to infiltrate a dense forest valley, gather intelligence from a fortified mock enemy compound, and exfiltrate without being detected, with evaluators hiding in the shadows to grade every action. Early into the mission, the team leader, Drake, made a tactical error, choosing a ridge too exposed, and while the others hesitated to challenge him, Elena didn't. She stepped beside him, pointed out the enemy sightline positions they had missed, recalculated their infiltration path in seconds, and though Drake initially scowled, he quickly realized she was right, adjusting the entire team's route accordingly. And that moment marked a shift, not just in strategy, but in leadership, because the men finally began consulting her, asking her for terrain reads, trusting her judgment implicitly. And by the time they reached the compound, fatigue weighed heavily on everyone except her. She pushed forward with relentless focus, crawling through mud, weaving through the underbrush, reading enemy patrol patterns with the precision of someone who had studied human behavior more deeply than maps. And when the evaluators launched an unexpected ambush, firing simulation rounds and deploying flashbangs to trigger panic, Elena was the only one who remained fully composed. She countered the assault with flawless coordination, redirected her teammates, angled their retreat path, shielded the slowest runner, and guided the entire team through a flanking maneuver that stunned even the instructors monitoring from the control van. By the time they reached extraction, the evaluators had already labeled her the standout graduate. And when Mason approached her afterward, he didn't greet her with the detached professionalism he usually maintained. He stood in front of her like a mentor, confronting the undeniable truth that his student had surpassed expectations even he hadn't dared to hope for. And he told her quietly that she had not only passed, but set an all-time record, prompting the rest of the team, including those who once doubted her most, to gather around her and offer congratulations that felt genuine, not compelled, not embarrassed, but earned, solid, real. Still, even after she was accepted fully into the elite program, the world outside the base didn't suddenly become easier. News outlets questioned the decision. Critics labeled her advancement as a PR move. Online forums buzzed with sexist claims that she'd been given favors. But Elena didn't respond publicly, didn't defend herself on social media, didn't engage in arguments, because she knew something they didn't. Her skill would speak for her on the battlefield far louder than any headline could, and that chance came sooner than anyone anticipated when an unexpected real-world deployment order arrived, sending her unit overseas for an emergency extraction of an intelligence asset trapped in hostile territory after a local militia seized control of the border town where he'd been hiding. The mission brief was grim. No air support, no armored vehicles, satellite coverage disruptions, and a narrow window to reach the target before he was moved to an unknown location. And when the team touched down beyond the ridgeline under the cover of night, every sound in the still air felt sharper, the stakes heavier, the world quieter than the training grounds ever were. Still, Elena kept her breathing steady, scanning the terrain with meticulous awareness. And when they encountered an enemy scout patrol unexpectedly early, it was her fast, silent takedown that prevented the entire mission from spiraling into catastrophe, proving her worth before the real danger even began. As they approached the cracked stone outskirts of the abandoned town, muzzle flashes lit the distant alleyways, and tension swelled around them. But Elena moved like she had been born for chaos, guiding the team through collapsed structures, slipping past militia trucks with engines rumbling low, calculating blind spots. And when they finally breached the safe house where the asset was held, she positioned herself at the front, absorbing the first volley of danger, firing precise shots that dropped hostile silhouettes before the men beside her even registered movement. The extraction didn't go smoothly. The militia rallied quickly, overwhelming the streets with vehicles and foot soldiers, and during their retreat, Drake was hit in the thigh, collapsing on a broken pavement as shouts echoed from the rooftops. But Elena didn't hesitate. She grabbed him, dragged him behind cover, and fired back with a calm so unnerving it felt supernatural, holding off enemies long enough for the others to reposition. And then she carried the wounded leader on her back as they sprinted toward the extraction zone, refusing to leave him even when logic demanded they lighten the load. And when the helicopter finally lifted them away from the crumbling town, the team looked at her with something beyond respect, something closer to awe, because no one else had fought with that much precision, courage, and clarity under pressure. Upon returning to base, reports spread through command channels, and despite external criticism, top brass finally understood exactly who she was. Not a symbol, not a quota, but a weapon sharpened through adversity and resilience. And as weeks passed, her name became synonymous with excellence, the kind that couldn't be denied. Eventually, during a quiet evening overlooking the sea, Mason handed her an encrypted folder, telling her she was being considered for a role that would rewrite programs across the entire branch, her performance becoming the foundation for integrating more women into roles previously locked behind outdated assumptions. And as she opened the file, reading the proposal for a new generation of mixed-gender special operations teams, she felt something profound settle in her chest. Not pride, not triumph, but purpose. The realization that everything she endured had never been just for her, but for those who would follow, for the women who would dare to step through doors she had kicked open. And on that day, standing beneath a sky streaked in golden fire, she knew her legacy would extend far beyond medals or missions, because she had changed the culture of a world built to exclude her simply by refusing to break, refusing to bend, refusing to be anything less than what excellence demanded. And if you were watching this journey on her brave stories, she would look directly into the camera and say, "Make sure you subscribe. Your support helps keep stories like these alive, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from." As her story continues, inspiring those who know courage isn't the absence of fear, but the defiance of every force that tried to silence her.